Hey everyone, welcome to episode 9 of The Cloud is Calling. We have a fantastic show for you today. I'm super excited to be joined by my colleague, Jesse Kielhorn, who heads up our Google practice here at Trace3. Jesse, excited to have you here on the show. Welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Derek. Excited to be here as well. I'm doing well.
Good.
Coming back from the customer event, feeling pretty good. Managed to not get in too much trouble in Vegas, so doing all right.
Always a good thing. Always a good thing. When Google Cloud comes up, what do you think is top of mind for a lot of our partner and customers when they think of Google Cloud?
Yeah, it's kind of understanding who Google is in the cloud space, right? Everyone knows Google for search because it's like Kleenex, right? You just Google something. Um, in terms of cloud, there's not a whole lot of understanding. When I worked there, especially in the early years, we'd have phone calls where they'd be like, "Wait, Google has a cloud?" And so that was a little painful at first, but it's come a long way, but it's still not there. So being third place for them has been tough.
Hmm.
Uh, when you start 10 years late, Amazon started in like what, March of 2006 or something like that.
Yeah, 2006. Yeah,
And then Azure came in
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then Google comes along and is like, here's our version of cloud, and throws out App Engine where you don't need to manage servers anymore. And the world was like, what is this? No thanks. We're just going to stick to VMs. So it's like that's been a tough road for them. They've really built backwards compatibility with a lot of the stuff. So VMs and all the underlying infrastructure that people actually end up using. But they had to play catch up, right? And that was tough. So
No, that's certainly a tough position to be in, and I'm curious about your opinion. Like, I kind of hear the same thing out there. Like, oh, like people are aware of Google Cloud now. It's not as kind of unknown as it was several years ago. But why do you think most people don't view Google Cloud the same way as they do Amazon and Microsoft Azure? Like, where do you think some of the disconnect is there between? Because there's relative parity between the three these days.
yeah, I'd actually argue that Google is the better one, simply because they don't have the technology, like the technology debt of starting 10 years late, right? Or well,
Mhm.
since they started late, they don't have that technical debt. So if you look at the way Amazon's architected, right, there's a lot of additional overhead needed for like networking between regions and all this other stuff. Um, but it's Google's a brand that people have been suspicious of for a long time, right? So it's like, oh, you take all this data and you collect it. What do you do with it, right? And so they have a hard time thinking about how they're going to work with their enterprise on that side. Same thing with like Apple, right? Everyone either loves or hates Apple. Like, oh, they're going to do whatever with your data, right? It's much the same thing. So I'm sure if Apple were to launch like an enterprise cloud, they'd face a lot of the same speculation.
Got it.
The other thing is Microsoft made it super easy to adopt Azure, right? Like you renew your licensing, it's like, oh, here's X percentage of your contract in like free cloud credits. And basically the entire world has some sort of EA with Microsoft. So when you can roll Azure straight into an existing EA, it makes it super easy to drive adoption. That's how they were able to come up so fast. And Google put cloud as a different business unit than ads. So you can't buy cloud on the ads contracts that so many customers have. So kind of a miss on their part there, but they're making up ground.
Good. Now, for customers who have already like started adopting Google Cloud or are seriously looking at it, what have you seen as kind of the most common struggle when it comes to adoption of Google Cloud for a lot of customers? I know you have a lot of conversations with various parties within different customers that we interact with. Like, what do you hear is kind of the most common thing that they struggle with?
The biggest thing is talent, right? It's like an AWS or Microsoft engineer are fairly common. And to find someone that has GCP experience is really, really tough. And when you do, they're mega expensive. So that's been the biggest thing. And then when you go out to look to market for help, right? You go to look for partners. There's only a handful, three or four that are like really highly recommended by Google. Um, and then there's no guarantee you're going to get the A team that's going to come and do your work, right?
Yeah,
So while they might have earned their stripes with Google, it doesn't mean you're going to get the folks that actually earn those stripes. So that's been a big struggle for customers trying to adopt Google. And then things have changed a bit originally. So when I started there in 2017, they didn't negotiate MSAs. They didn't negotiate prices. They didn't negotiate anything. So it was like if like to get a discount at Google, you had to spend $1 million a month or more. So it's like, how do you expect to build a business like that from scratch and just not change anything, right? Like you expect Lowe's or Home Depot to, take your MSA as it's written. Probably not going to happen. So
Yeah.
fortunately, a lot of that has changed. But it took them a couple of years to realize that just because they're Google doesn't mean people are just going to accept whatever they give them. So,
No, that's certainly, yeah. I used to work at a previous company. They were a big Google partner, and I kind of remember some of that kind of mentality being like, "Oh, we're Google. Like, you just need to take it as is." And it's like, things don't quite always work that way, and there's always some back and forth with some things. But when I was at that partner, and we did spend a lot of time. Google was very big in kind of the education space and um, data science, things like that. And so I wanted to kind of delve down that topic as to what makes Google so special in that space, right? Things like around machine learning, data intelligence. Why do you feel Google is so innovative in that space? And essentially, in my opinion, Microsoft and Amazon are playing catch up in that world.
yeah, the education move was so smart on their part, right? If you think about giving all of these schools, colleges, workspaces for basically nothing, you raise this entire generation of kids or young adults that are like, Microsoft Word, what's this? I don't want to use that. Right. So in Chrome, they have all these preferences coming straight out of school for the productivity tools. It makes it difficult for enterprises to, convince them, it's okay to use Excel or whatever. Right. So that was super smart. Um, but on the ML side, if you think about search and all the different tools that use artificial intelligence and machine learning just on a daily basis, they have a huge leg up there just for their search engine, right? Microsoft tried with Bing, but I would argue hasn't had a ton of success. And then Android, right? So you use Google Assistant or all the home devices, right? That all of that stuff helps train all the different models and helps refine the hardware that they use underlying a lot of that stuff. So they have TPUs or TensorFlow processing units as well. So it's this proprietary hardware that is extraordinarily strong for doing machine learning. They have giant racks. So like a standard rack in a data center is like maybe 24 to 36 kW. So kilowatts in like, so that's pretty high density. And these TensorFlow racks are like custom liquid cooled and they do like 150 kW in the same space. So it's super, super dense and it cuts down training time a ton. So rather than spending days or weeks training your model, these TensorFlow units can do that in like days or hours. And so it really gives them this edge over everybody else. And in some cases, the Google kind of mantra of like, don't be creepy kicks in. Like I've lost a number of deals over the years on AIML stuff where it's like, this customer wants to do facial recognition. And Google's like, we're not going to do that. Where Microsoft is like, yeah, that's Michael Jordan. Like, they'll tell you exactly who it is right away and some of this other stuff. So, they try to walk a line with that,
Mhm.
but that's really some of the reason they've been so far ahead. It's just like the massive adoption of their products and then some of the underlying hardware that allows them to train things much faster than anybody else.
Yeah, no, I think one of the most popular products I kept coming across was BigQuery, and I think I can confidently say I think to this date that's probably the most popular cloud solution that Google offers. Would
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. That
Yeah,
segues right into the data intelligence part, right? So like
yeah, exactly. I mean,
doing data at scale intelligently is really tough. But Google has 9 products with 1 billion daily users. Like if you think about that for a second, imagine 9 billion just hits every day just to your product, and that's just nuts. And
that'd be an
so
enterprise's dream.
yeah, right. And so to be able to do that, they've had to come up with things like BigQuery and Spanner and Kubernetes and like all these different tools to be able to handle that sort of load in a reliable fashion, right? So like to test your internet connection, hey, is my Wi-Fi working? What do? You go to google.com, right? Because Google's never down. And so that's part of how they've gone in and built all this stuff. And then what they've done is they've made those tools that they use, like BigQuery, available to everybody, right? And so it takes the skill that they've earned over the years and the technical knowledge that they've learned and then made it available to the world. It's seriously impressive. And while some of it is proprietary, like BigQuery and Spanner, you hate to see proprietary stuff, but the way that they had to solve some of the problems at scale required the proprietary networking, the proprietary coding, and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
But really, that's how they've achieved those things. I mean, Amazon gets a ton of hits, but I doubt it's 9 billion hits a day.
I don't know. We'll have to go take a look and find out.
To beat up Joe for some information.
Something like that. Um, uh, Try and prognosticate a little bit for me, and maybe you have insider knowledge, but don't give away too much. What investments do you see Google making inside of its cloud space? Like, where do you see them heading 2 years, 3 years down the road, and what can we look at? So maybe coming up that would get people excited. Like, yeah, that may be the cloud I want to be in because in 12 months, 18 months, they're going to have this really awesome capability, and that's where I want to be.
Yeah, fantastic question. So it was a question I had to answer a lot. Was Google end of life things all the time. Think like Google Plus, right? They went all in on this platform to give Facebook a hard time, and then didn't really
And then
attain
sunsetted
adoption.
it.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it got end of life pretty quickly. And so that was a big thing for enterprise customers. Like, I'm not going to spend all this time and effort investing in Google if you're just going to end of life this Google Cloud thing. And so the answer that we use for a lot of time is like, look, over the last 36 months, we've invested. When I first started, it was like $20 billion. That number is $52 billion invested in the last 36 rolling months. So like, there's a huge amount of investment going on into infrastructure, into networking, into all the new services and tools that they're going to be rolling out. We'll hear a lot about that at Google Next this week. But when I was there, we had access to some pretty interesting stuff. Google's really good about not obfuscating information about like the network and all that stuff. So on one of the technical all hands, they had a plan to deploy 5 million servers in 2.5 years. That's just an insane
That's
amount of
insane.
capacity.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that's not just for Google, right? Because there's one of the interesting things that Google has done is they've built the cloud platform, right? It's not this is the customer cloud platform and this is the platform that Google uses. It's the same platform. The Fed cloud, the PCI, the HIPAA, all that stuff is all on the same platform. There's not a gov cloud. They found a way to make it so that the government can use all the same hardware. So these huge expansions that they've built really benefits everybody that uses their services.
No, that's a good segue into kind of where I was thinking, because I think one of the things I'm excited the most about is Google Chronicle, and you're talking about how Google has designed their cloud to be compliant no matter who uses it. And I think a big part of that security story is Chronicle. And Google recently made a huge splash in that space in its acquisition of Mandiant.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that acquisition playing into Chronicle and kind of that overall story of, hey, look, we're secure no matter who you are, and you can come use our one platform, not this separate gov cloud or this separate public cloud.
Yeah, I think it plays to some of the strengths that Google has, right? So originally, or from the beginning, Google has thought about security. So everything's encrypted end to end on Google, right? So you make a request to Google in some way, shape, or form, Mr. Customer, whatever, example.com. That hits the Google front end, right? So there's these tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of devices that sit in the network at the edge, right? So because Google's network is insanely large, it has roughly double what they estimate the public internet to be in egress capacity, right? So trying to DDoS Google is impossible. You just take down the rest of the internet instead. And so at that point, the Google front end actually encapsulates that request and no longer speaks TCP/IP anymore, right? So Vince Cerf works at Google. He's the only guy that walks around in San Francisco in a three-piece suit in that office still, and speaks a proprietary network technology that's also encrypted because they found one of the governments tapping cables off the coast of Australia, and it was like, rather than just pulling the taps out, they just rewrote their language. Said forget it. And so from that point on, it's encrypted from the Google Edge all the way through to the VM that you're hosting your information on. The disk image for that's encrypted twice at rest. The data is encrypted as it sits in memory. So all the memory on VMs is encrypted, right? So you can't even try and steal those. And the VMs are actually nested. So they live inside containers. So that's how they're able to provide that level of security. And you get some additional features like lab migration. So I don't know if you remember when the Intel processor exploits were going on with the speculative math.
Yep, I remember it. Yep.
Because of the nested technology with the VMs, they rebooted 2.5 million servers twice, and nobody on the platform even noticed. because they were able to live
Oh,
migrate all those machines. Yeah. So they found the fix for the speculative. So Google actually found that exploit originally. It was an intern. So Google employs roughly 1,200 people to break things 24/7, 365. And an intern found this. And so they start sharing this information internally. And there was a screenshot. I wish I could have saved it when I left, but it's the VP of Intel, the VP of AMD, and the VP of one other company on the phone. And the Intel guy has his head in his hands because he realizes how big of a deal this is, right? To turn off
oh yeah,
the
that it
speculative
was
math.
huge.
You take like a 15 to 20% performance hit, especially with VMs. And so we implemented a fix that at least solved the problem so you couldn't do what the exploit wanted. But
Hmm.
then we found a way to fix it with like 1 or 2% loss in performance instead of like the 15 to 20%. And so we did all of the patching about that silently behind the scenes. And nobody even noticed, right? I was on phone calls with customers panicking. I'm like, go check your kernel version.
You're good.
And they log in, they check, like, oh, it's good. Like, yeah, like we didn't go down. It's like, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why you came here. So you didn't go down. Right. And so when you think about the way Google has been architected from the beginning, a lot of these tools and acquisitions just make a ton of sense. So, Chronicle was a awesome acquisition, right? It gives tons of visibility. Um, it uses a lot of the native tools, so you can do these broad searches and inspection at scale, right? So it's not like you have 5 VMs when you're working in Google for the most part, right? You have tens of thousands of them, and you're generating millions and millions of log files every minute or hour, depending on how busy your application is. And to try and process that scale without something like BigQuery or something like Spanner eating in that metadata just becomes impossible. And
Yeah.
so being able to use a lot of those native tools allows you to have this security posture where you can react more quickly to the information you're given. And I saw that there was a post about their acquisition of Mandiant. Is that how you would pronounce
Hmm.
that?
I pronounce it Mandiant. Hopefully, I'm not butchering
All right.
it.
Well, there's two of us that say it that way, so we must be right.
Okay, good.
Um, that was an excellent purchase as well because you take all the information you get from Chronicle, um, and while you're alerted in real time and you're given these different attacks or whatever that you have to deal with in real time, you still have to deal with them, right? There's like you've been given the information, now you have to act on it, and that's where the Mandiant part comes in, right?
Yeah,
So not only do they do some stuff that might eat some of our business, where they do some of the security analysis, which not super happy about
that's
that,
fine.
but Derek, that's going to be your job to fix, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but they also come with the capability of actually mitigating and responding to attacks, which is something that is super helpful, right? So you want to have all those people in, I think they said something like 80 countries or 22 countries offering 80 new cities, whatever it was, right? This large new capacity of people, bringing them into the Google security ecosystem and just letting them do their thing. So it's super exciting to see how that goes. I'm really interested to see how um, like the integration into the portal goes and how they pull
Hmm.
that off and all that stuff. Because I remember when they bought Stackdriver, it took them a good like year or
Yeah,
so to kind of like
it took them a while to get
properly,
Stackdriver integrated.
yeah,
Yeah.
properly integrated. So I'm hoping that Chronicle went pretty smooth. So it
Mhm.
seems like they're getting better at this buy versus build thing. And so I'm sure the customers will see the benefit of this sooner rather than later.
Well, I'm sure, I'm hoping, and I'll do my best because I'm going to be checking in on Ignite, but I'm also going to be checking in on Google Next. I'm hoping at Next they'll be sharing a bit more detail on how the Mandiant integration is going, what are going to be some of those capabilities. So I'm super excited. I'm hoping to catch what I can live, but obviously I'll rewatch some stuff also. Um, One last thing before I let you go, and this is probably the most obligatory question that most people get asked in this space, but I feel like it's important for people to understand. What areas do you see as the best fit for Google Cloud for a customer? Right? If I'm somebody new and I'm looking at all three providers, and I see Google, you know, what are the best things as me as a customer can put in there and get the most value out of, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think if you are considering containers in any way, shape, or form, if that's on the roadmap, and I don't know any companies where it's not really, like let's build more monoliths. Said no CTO ever, right?
Exactly.
Um, Containers really, really is where Google was. just so far ahead of everybody else, right? I mean, when you basically own or release the open source version of Kubernetes and maintain it for the most part to the cloud world, it's hard to argue that anybody else is going to do containers better than Google.
Yeah.
We see a lot of other interesting stuff. Retail, of course, does very well in Google because it's hard to justify giving Amazon your money when you're probably competing against them in some way.
I was going to say they're probably your competition.
Yeah, same thing with healthcare, right? As Amazon continues to innovate and find ways to be disruptors, as they often are. They've picked on the healthcare space, and so healthcare has also been pretty heavy in GCP.
Oh, that's good. And obviously continuing education as well, I think.
Yeah,
for me.
there's like a whole sales org just for that, but the prices they sell stuff at is insane. I don't know how you make your quota in the education section.
All right. Well, Jesse, I appreciate you taking some time out of your morning to chat with me. Really appreciate it, sharing your knowledge about Google Cloud and some of the stuff that you feel is coming up. Looking forward to your thoughts on Google Next. I'm sure I'll catch up with you on that sometime later. For the rest of you, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Cloud is Calling.